I decided to just share a few excerpts from the Declaration of Independence, knowing that tomorrow is the 4th of July, when the Declaration of Independence was made official. Apparently it was written on and approved by July 2nd, I think, but they didn't get all the final approvals until the 4th. But the key one, the one that was is the preamble. Many of us memorized the preamble of the Declaration of Independence when we were children. But to me, this is a core American moral code that I think is perfect. It's dead on. And I kind of want to read the preamble. I want to break it down. So, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So think about that. I mean, let's break this down. So we hold these truths to be self-evident. It means they're obvious. These are truths that exist before government was created. And the fact that all men are created equal. Now, what does that mean? All created equal. Does it mean that we all should have equal outcomes? No. Does it mean we all should make the equal amount of money? No. Does it mean we all should have equal access to different things in society? No, not really. In fact, in a country that values liberty, we're going to have a lot of inequality. You hear a lot about this where, we have too much inequality, wealth inequality, income inequality, all these other versions of inequality or inequity. But in a nation where people are allowed to live their lives and pursue their careers, pursue their happiness, live their life according to their own values, there's going to be different outcomes. Some people are going to be pilots. Some people are going to be teachers. Some people are going to be artists. Some people could throw a fastball 98 miles an hour. Some people want to be a stay-at-home mom. Some people don't want to be a stay-at-home mom, and women that want to pursue a very vigorous career and they want to be able to have all the power and success and opportunities any man would. But in a nation that values freedom, inequality is a feature, not a bug. However, there are some categories where equality is necessary, and that's what they declare here in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Now, what does that mean? Okay, first of all men, they really mean all humans. Okay, it's not male versus female or trans or anything. They really mean all humans. Just like when Neil Armstrong said, "One small step for man, one step for man, large step for mankind," whatever he said. He's referring to humankind. So all men are created equal. It means all humans are created equal. Now, what does that mean, created equal? It means that we all have equal rights. We all have equal liberties. We all have equality under the law. We're going to all pursue our life in lots of different ways, but we should be treated equally by the government. In this case, the Declaration of Independence creating America. We should have equality under the law. And I think that is a huge philosophical idea that was groundbreaking in 1776, and today in 2024 is still a groundbreaking idea, because people don't want equal rights for others. They want women to be oppressed. They want immigrants to be oppressed. They don't want people coming here from certain countries. They don't want people having access to this or to buy that. Everyone wants to restrict someone else and prevent them from living their life and pursuing their own values. That's a problem. But in America, we should have equality under the law. That's what makes this SCOTUS decision giving presidents partial immunity so egregious, because it violates what America is supposed to be about in the first place, that we're created equal. But no, in this case, the president is above the law, according to SCOTUS. That's wrong. That's immoral. That's unethical. That's anti-American. Going further in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, that these truths are to be self-evident, that they are endowed by their creator. Okay, now, to some people, your creator is God. Other people think your creator, maybe you're not religious, but maybe you think of nature as being what created you. You know, humans and nature, we can procreate, but essentially it means that we have these truths that are self-evident, these inalienable rights. Those are by default built into us as humans. We don't Government didn't invent the right. You know, some would say they're God-given rights. I wouldn't say that. I would just say it's obvious by looking at nature that we all have a right to our own life. We're all trying to survive and succeed and pursue our values, and we all have a right to live our own life. And this is something that is inalienable, can't be taken away, because it's the default setting that we are in charge of ourselves, that we own ourselves. So that among these are certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our right to our own life. That means we make decisions about our own life. Our life is ours. Our body is ours. Your body, your choice. That applies with abortion. It applies with vaccine mandates the same way. Your body, your choice, your life. You have an inalienable right to you, to your life. You have an inalienable right to liberty, which means you can make choices. In a free society, you should be able to make choices. You should be able to buy and sell and cooperate with others. And you should be able to live your life based on your own values, your own convictions, your own beliefs. You should be able to pursue your own happiness. This, again, a groundbreaking philosophical idea that I think the founding fathers of America got dead on perfect. Well, maybe with the exception of the created by their creator, because that's a debatable point. But the fact that we each own our own life is a huge deal, because prior to America, people were subjects of kings. People lived under dictators. People were lived under the rule of a lord in a feudal society. People didn't have a right to their own life. They were some version of a slave. They weren't allowed to own property, or they weren't allowed to do a lot of things in society by decree of a king, by some authority. And here in America, they're saying, no, everyone has a right to their own life in America. And this is a nation that is of the people, by the people, for the people. This is a huge experiment, a huge groundbreaking idea in the course of human civilization. It's what truly, in my opinion, makes America great. Never mind the fact that our Republican and Democratic friends are trying to find ways all the time to violate our rights to our own life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, the founders, while they did get the philosophy right, the implementation of it has been checkered, has been problematic, and we still are not fully implemented. You know, I mean, there were contradictions right out of the gate. There was slavery in America in 1776. Thomas Jefferson, who I think wrote this portion of the Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, was inspired by philosophers like John Locke and others. It goes all the way back to Aristotle. Those ideas that he rightfully wrote in the Declaration of Independence, he himself, Thomas Jefferson, was a violator because he himself owned slaves. Some people will say that the fact that our founding fathers owned slaves makes them, we should cancel them, that the founding fathers and the values they expressed in the founding of America, therefore, are immoral, flawed, wrong, because they were slave owners. Well, some of them were, but not all of them. But I would contend that they got it right philosophically. Now, over time, slavery was abolished, thankfully. Over time, women got the right to vote. Over time, we've had rights for LGBTQ. We have women have a right to choose on their own body. Until recently, the SCOTUS removed it from removed Roe v. Wade, which I thought was abysmal, was awful. Basically preventing a woman from a right to her own life. And we still have a lot of work to do. Some people say we need women's rights, we need LGBTQ rights. What we really need is equal rights. We need rights that we all have. We all should have equal rights. No one having more rights than another person. And so sometimes I think people get caught up in the idea that we need Black rights and Hispanic rights and women's rights and Christian rights, and to the point where we get so divvied up, so parsed, so fractionalized that we lose sight of the fact that really we should just all have the same rights, our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all of us equally. There's still work to be done. I know the EPA, not sorry, the EPA, the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA. I thought there were parts of that were actually quite good, and I don't think they ever passed that as a constitutional amendment. That's something I think should be re-explored, because we all deserve equal rights, and if we can create a constitutional amendment that will reinforce that, I think that can only be good. I'd have to go back and read the detail of the proposed ERA, but I know they were rallying back in the 70s to make that a constitutional amendment, and they didn't quite get enough. But I think that might be something worthy of pursuing in the future. What do you think? Now, there's a few other things I want to mention here because they conflict with what's going on in the real world today. Because if you read the Declaration of Independence, after the preamble and establishing our inalienable rights and consent to the governed and all of that, then they go into a list of issues where they were angry with King George III. And they were calling him out for this and that, and all using that as the basis to declare independence and basically say, F you, King George. But there are a couple of here that I think are worthy of mentioning because they're relevant today. One of them is objections to the king. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Essentially saying that the king ignored laws, that thought he was above the law. And what do we have here in America? The same thing. We have a presidential candidate in Trump that is a violator of the law, that doesn't think the law applies to him, and thinks that he deserves immunity, while at the same time declaring himself the law and order president. Insane. The very reasons that America was fighting against England 250 years ago, we still have that problem today amongst American leaders that think they're above the law. One of the other objections to the king, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of the new appropriations of the land. So the king was preventing people from coming to America, from immigrating here. Sounds familiar, right? I mean, we got President Trump building this beautiful wall, and then we have Biden expanding the wall. We have Republicans that are demanding a stop to illegal immigration. And now we have a Democratic president that has taken executive order, anti-democratic executive order, to put further restrictions on immigration and to set quotas on the number of people that they will allow from any given country. Border walls, immigration restrictions is the exact opposite of our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Keep in mind that those rights don't just apply to Americans. They don't just apply to white men. They apply to everyone. That's why some people say they're God-created rights. That's why all men are created equal. People lose sight of this, that immigrants have a right to their own life too. But people want to prevent them from coming in, building walls, restricting them. They want to have mass deportation. All of that is anti-American, anti-Independence Day values. And in fact, they called out the King of England for that very same reason. Further, one of the objections to the king was for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Does that sound familiar? We have President Trump that has the tariffs and the trade wars. And then we have Biden doing trade wars as well. He just jacked up tariffs in a lot of other categories more than Trump. Biden has a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. And tariffs make products more expensive. In some cases, they ban imported products entirely. Baby formula is a great example of that. They won't let imported baby formula, or they'll only in limited quantities let baby formula in from European nations that have very good regulations to make sure that it's safe and clean and good for kids to eat. But they limit it today. And that's why we had a baby formula crisis a few years ago. And it got so bad that President Biden had to use the military to airlift baby formula back into America. So restrictions in trade, the American revolutionaries were angry with King George, and yet we're having the same problem now. We should, in a free society that reinforces our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we should have free trade. Buyers and sellers should be able to trade with one another without restrictions, without tariffs, without border walls. It's amazing that we still have this problem. There are certain forces in America that want to go in the opposite direction of freedom. And it's not just one party, it's both parties. In some cases, one party is worse. In other cases, the other party is worse. Then further goes on, objections from the king for imposing taxes on us without our consent. Well, guess who did that? Both President Trump and President Biden used their executive orders to increase tariffs. That wasn't passed by Congress. It didn't go through a democratic process. The President of the United States unilaterally used executive orders to increase taxes on tariffs. And who pays taxes on tariffs? Americans do. Not the Chinese, not the Vietnamese, not the Koreans or the Japanese or the Mexicans. Tariffs are taxes on American consumers. And especially they're taxes that are not by a democratic process. They are done by decree with a pen and a phone, by an executive order, by a president, without consent from the people. That was one of the objections of the King George of England in 1776. It's still a problem today in America. And then finally, he has excited domestic insurrections amongst us. So the founding fathers of America were angry at King George because King George was sending insurrectionists into America to cause trouble and try to take down this effort for independence. Sound familiar? January 6th, anyone? Where we have insurrection that is being fueled by Donald Trump that leads to people invading our capital and trying to essentially overturn an election by threatening to kill the vice president of the United States. So it's crazy to see this when you read the Declaration of Independence and see how the things that Americans 250 years ago were rightfully upset with from England, from their king, are problems that we're still seeing today from authoritarian leaders in America that want to be king. What do you think of that? You know, our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a flag I will stand on all day, every day. That doesn't mean necessarily that I approve of your decisions or approve of the way you choose to live your life or the choices you make or your version of happiness. But I will protect your right to do that, particularly if you don't harm anyone else or violate anyone else's rights in the process. That should be what America is all about, that we all have equal rights to our own life. And I think if people understood that, then we wouldn't have a housing crisis in San Diego, because then people would be able to build on their own land because it's their own life, their own property, and they're building on it. But instead, we have NIMBYs that are telling other people that you don't have a right to your own liberty. We, the people, have the right to overrule your ability to develop your own property. Some people wonder why I'm so outspoken on property rights. This is why. because we have a right to our own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And right to property is an extension of our right to our own life, because we use our property as a means of generating income or generating resources to live a good life. What are your thoughts on that? Let me